Whatever the occasion, effortless elegance is right this way. Because Hilton brings you new ways to stay courtesy of the Nomad London. And it doesn't stop at award-winning dining in a space draped in velvet and illuminated by vintage chandeliers. No, this day goes beyond with unparalleled personalized service and attentive hospitality. Oh, and did we mention the Nomad London can be booked using your Hilton Honors points at Hilton.com? Hilton, for the stay.
I have with me Delia Ephron, who's a great novelist, a screenwriter, co-wrote You've Got Mail, among other things. And her new book, Left on Temp, A Second Chance of Life, I have to tell you guys, is an amazing read. I couldn't put it down. And of course, this woman really knows how to write, and she takes you along on her journey. And a lot of it is very sad, and you think, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? And then, well, I'm going to let Delia tell you, but she went through a lot. Early on in this, she lost her sister, Nora, one of 4 girls, all writers, and then her husband, a writer, Jerry. Both Jerry and Nora got cancer and passed away from that. And then Delia did what a lot of us do when we have circumstances like that. You sort of take care of things you never thought about. In this case, Delia's husband's landline. And as she says, she ended up in Verizon hell. But on the other hand, she owes a lot to Verizon, because if she didn't do what she always does, wrote about it, got in the New York Times, her life would have been a lot different. So welcome, Delia. Congratulations on the book.
Thank you.
And let's go back to the annoying Verizon and how, as you said, you complain the way you know best. You write about it.
Yeah, well, if you've ever lost someone I'd been married to Jerry for 32 years, and I was so displaced, and then you're trying to do everything that you can to sort of organize your new world. And when I disconnected his landline, Verizon crashed my internet. And I spent, I swear, weeks on the phone with them, getting disconnected, and then having to call back and obey their prompts, which is such an upsetting thing to have to do. You have to be polite to them after they're rude to you. It's very agitating. So I wrote a piece that was both sad and funny about this battle with Verizon, and and 5 months later, really, it wasn't instantly, but 5 months later, and it was 3 days after the first-year anniversary of Jerry's death, I got an email through my website from Peter. Peter was a psychiatrist. He was then living in the Bay Area in Marin County, and he wrote me, and he had the same problem, disconnecting his wife's phone. I mean, it turns out that is a universal problem. I got so much mail on that from people who've been absolutely tortured by their phone companies. So he said, we had 2 or 3 dates, I don't know, 54 years ago.
And you didn't remember,
when you were 18.
Right?
No, I did not remember. I still do not remember. I was thinking maybe I should have hypnosis or something to remember. He said we went to a football game, and I have some memory of being at a Columbia football game with some snow falling, and he said, yes, snow did fall, but I don't remember him. Anyway, I got this completely charming note, and Nora had fixed us up. So it was so amazing that,
weird.
She was gone, and yet there she was, and here he was. And first thing I did, 2 things. I sent it to a girlfriend to see what she thought of this note and if I should answer it. And she said, yes, he sounds like someone to get to know. And the other thing I did was I Googled him, of course. And I finally figured out, I couldn't find a picture, but I figured out that he was an expert in sexual harassment, that he'd written 2 books about, men in of authority who use it to abuse women, and he was an expert on that. He testified in court on behalf of women, and in the 80s, which was long before it was fashionable in any way to do that, I thought, oh my God, this is a substantive man. So we started writing, and I was not looking to fall in love. I actually hadn't really something that actually crossed my mind. And the next thing I knew, we were in love, and we were writing these endlessly long emails, and then we started talking for hours on the phone, and it was kind of a miracle.
Well,
and anyway, as you know from reading my book, what happened next, which is that, of course, when if you fall in love in your 70s and death is so close you can reach out and touch it, you have to tell everything that you might have had or could have. And I knew that I had been a bone match for my sister Nora, but they wouldn't use me, and she didn't want it anyway.
Right, and
but
Nora
they wouldn't
had
use
a blood.
me.
Let's remind people, Nora had a blood cancer.
Yeah, right. That Nora had leukemia. She had myelodysplastic syndrome, which morphs almost inevitably into leukemia, and hers did. And the only way you can really cure AML, which is acute myelogenous leukemia, is to have a bone marrow transplant. And I knew that I was a match for her, but they tested my marrow, and they saw my marrow was a teeny bit wonky, and they didn't want to use me. So I was being tested every 6 months just in case something might happen.
Right.
This had been going on for 8 years.
But you were okay. But it
totally,
was
I was 100% fine. Every time they did my blood, my doctor said, "This is the most boring blood I've seen today. Goodbye. Come back in 6 months." And then I went in 4 months after falling in love with Peter. And it was such a passionate relationship, and it was so powerful. And I went into the doctor for my 6-month checkup, and she ran my blood, and I had leukemia. There it was. You bet, right there.
Right. You had a gift given to you, and then you're terrified it's going to be taken away.
Yeah,
because
right.
You had lived through it.
Yes, I did. I guess, my book is really about 4 years of my life left undone, when things so wondrous and so tragic happened to me that after I survived it all, I thought, and my writer's heart started beating again, because believe me, getting cured from leukemia is quite
horrible.
Oh my God, harrowing. It was. I thought I would never write again. And then I started to get well, really well. And I looked at those years and I thought, this is everything you could ever want to write about. Really, you've just had this amazing thing happen to you. You just so serious loss. Then love again. Then threat of death.
A threat of loss.
Yeah, and yes, and then so much luck, good and bad, that it made me wonder about things like miracles. And I thought, well, I have to write this. Life just gave me a story.
I'm talking to Delia Ephron, left on 10th. Her memoir, Her Second Chance of Life, her rebirth in many ways. And if you've ever known anyone or heard about the treatment for her particular blood cancer, it's worse, people say, than the disease, and many people just give up. They cannot go through it. And you tried to give up, but your community could not possibly allow that, including your new love, whom you had married after you were diagnosed, Peter.
Yes. We was that weekend that we were sitting there, and I knew I was checking into the hospital on Tuesday, and I was making French toast and thinking about where my life was now, and Peter suddenly said, we should get married. And then he just kind of heard himself say it, and then he stood up and said, "Will you marry me?" And I said, yes. We always thought we would, almost from the very beginning. And so we went out the next day, and we got a license and a ring, and I checked into the hospital on Tuesday. And then we got married in the dining room on the 14th floor with a few close friends. This book, Left on 10th, is also about the power of friendship.
Exactly.
Because I was not just carried by Peter, but I was carried by the love of my girlfriends. And I call them women warriors. But, when you get sick, I think you kind of have to think about who can take this journey with me, who will be the right people. And I just had this amazing group of friends, not a big group, because, you can't take a lot of people on a trip like this. It's not a party.
Not at all.
But I was so nurtured by them and by Peter. And the treatment is so grueling. I mean, not just the chemo, and how you get so sick from it, and you can't eat, and you're taking thousands of pills. And
you're throwing up all the time.
I was in the hospital 100 days, and I was just a rag of a person, and I just kept. At that point, I was so depressed. Have you ever been deeply depressed?
No, not like that. But
you're
such
I
a
never
good
had
writer
been.
But we felt what you were feeling, and that's what's so extraordinary. I kept shaking my head and saying, is she, well, I knew, of course, you were going to come out the other end.
Yeah,
but
because I wrote the book.
Because you wrote the book, and because I have friends who play bridge with you. She's going to survive. She's going to survive. And,
right.
Like, how do you know? I know. Don't ask. But
yeah, I know.
Anyway,
Even my doctor said when she read the book, she started to worry about whether I was going to make it. Nobody.
I know that it was like, how could
drama
someone
is what I
go
love,
through?
and I need to keep. I do need to keep people turning the page. It's one of the things as a writer that's important to me. Is it's the way I like to read books. So,
but you know what, Delia, and this is even before the hideous treatment. I have friends who, through loss or divorce or whatever, will often say, I don't necessarily want another husband. I need a companion. I need a companion.
Mm-hmm.
But that wasn't you. It was different because you had plenty of companions, women and men, from a hairdresser on.
I am very bonded to a number of people who keep me floating. I am, and I was trying to think about that because I've been asked a lot about that. Is it brave to start another relationship or something like that? And I don't. It just happened to me. I didn't know I was looking for it, and I think part of being alive is being open to things, and I just suspect I was open to it. But also I had a very happy marriage, so I had good feelings about marriage as a safe and nurturing place. And so I think also, I had this really crazy dream, which I wrote about in the book, which I really wanted to spend some time with Jerry after he died. And, there's no way to do that. That's what's so awful about death. And I'd had a wonderful dream about Nora. And in dreams, people can really feel like they're alive. So I said, I want to dream about Jerry. I want him to be with me in a dream. And I dreamed this dream in which he said to me, I want a divorce. And I said, what? And he said, yes, I want a divorce. And I said, but we can still be friends, can't we? I mean, I can still come over and talk to you whenever I want, right? And he said no, and he walked out the door. And I woke up in a state of complete shock because, of course, in a dream, it felt like Jerry. It absolutely was Jerry.
It was real.
Yeah, it was absolutely real. And yet I knew it wasn't Jerry. It was me. I had this dream. And in this dream, I was telling myself, he is not there for you anymore. You have to go forward. He's not there to go into the next room and tell everything about your day and laugh and discuss your work and all that. He's not there. It was like I was being ruthless with myself. And so I think I understood that from that dream, that I was really on my own.
And he was
and
letting you go.
There was life to be had out there. Also, I do like to have fun. I'm not real I'm not an extrovert exactly, although I can give an impression of one. But I like to be alone a lot. But
well, you're a writer.
I do like to have fun. I like to laugh. I think that the joyful part of me wanted some exercise.
But you were also willing to take a chance. I have friends who say, I can never have another real relationship. I'll never get undressed in front of a man, ever.
Yeah.
I can't bear to look in the mirror myself.
Yeah, that's a big thing.
And here you are at 70 years old, and you are suddenly madly in love.
It just went out the window. All those feelings went out the window when I met Peter. They just did.
Unreal.
It was just so passionate. And believe me, I'd be the first person to say that, you know? Well, no, I wouldn't, actually. But
no, you would make it funny.
But I really understand that totally. I mean, wow, especially in this culture, you know.
Of course. And then you did brave things. You went to visit where he lives, and then he came back to New York. It's quite an amazing story, because everyone says, how does something like that happen? We forgot to remind people, when he contacted you and everything, he had suffered loss too. He had lost his wife.
Yes, his wife had died of lung cancer, although she's not a smoker, so he had experienced loss, and he had experienced loss when he was very young, which is that when he was 7, he was playing outside on Central Park West and 102nd Street or 103rd, and there he heard this giant scream in a crash, and he looked to the street, and his mother and sister were hit by a car.
That's awful.
And so that he had trauma from a young age. I mean, his sister survived, but his mother did not. And that was the last time he ever saw his mother. I mean, so the fact that Peter's a psychiatrist, that he's a healer, you know, that was also part of the miracle for me. Who else could have taken me on this journey through hell, through this tunnel? Who else could have been my guide but Peter?
No, and he was there.
Yeah,
Even in the hospital, they couldn't believe it.
To it. So, and when I was so depressed, of course, and my girlfriends are saying,
worried.
Look at her. She's, are we letting her go? And he said, look, I'm reading I believe if we can get through this particular crisis, she will survive. And he said, you can't let a really depressed person make decisions for themselves. They don't have their proper mind available.
But then,
and he was just clear. He said it was hard as hell, but he knew that. He just knew it. That
you would get through, and he would be there. Delia Ephron,
I mean, he's such a hero in the book. Part of
he's a hero.
The book is totally. Part of why I think the book is getting as much love as it is. As Peter is so.
But we all want Peter. Delia, okay, but give us Peter. But
I've got him.
You got him. But here's the question: when you go through that kind of experience, and I actually have a friend who went through that kind of treatment, and oh my God, it's beyond belief. It's so devastating and horrible. But I was curious. You survived, thank goodness, and you and Peter went home. And we forgot to mention that with all the losses, your beloved dog died too. So there wasn't an instant when something wasn't happening.
Yeah, it's really true. I'm almost embarrassed to say this, but the hardest thing for me to write in this book was the loss of Honey. I couldn't admit that I wasn't there when she died. I had so much trouble, and I just kept forcing me. A memoir has to tell the truth. Everything should tell the truth when you write. But, of course, in this book, it was my rule, to be honest. So I had to just keep forcing myself. And people have written me that was, if you have a dog, the loss. So it's just unbearable.
I know.
And so part of that is also the rebirth of getting Charlotte, my new little pup. And, this only thing that gets you over one dog is nothing really gets you over losing your dog. But it does help to have the joy of a dog in your life. It just really does.
I'm talking to Delia Ephron, but again,
I just want to say one thing. I think I've gotten a lot of mail from this book, emails and stuff, and lots of people have Peter, somebody who got them through. someone who loved them, whether it was someone they're in love with, or someone who was just very close to them, or a child, or their grown child, or but you need someone. You do need somebody with you. I really would say that if you're going to go through something that traumatic, it's helpful to have someone who's there every day.
And pulling you through, who understands.
Yeah, who believes in you, who believes in it, and who always buoys you.
And knows that person who is suffering so terribly is not the real you. It's the you that has to survive. That is so important,
Joan. Thank you for saying that, yes.
But Delia, the curiosity, you survive the unsurvivable. You come home with this extraordinary human being, a devoted partner, a loving partner. Was it, or could you not remember, the same as it was before he embarked upon this dangerous trip with you?
No.
What happened?
I have to say that we were in the midst of the headiest romance, and believe me, this actually put us into a quieter type of love. That requires almost a suspension of, it doesn't even require it, it causes such a suspension of any, that's one of the things that's so curing about falling in love is all that loss I'd felt, all that sorrow. I mean, all I could feel was a kind of a glow from being with Peter, from feeling sexually alive, from feeling all of that. And then, boom, this diagnosis. And it did immediately, I say, we still romantic, but that particular type of romance requires it put us into another place, and we had to really figure out. We get along just incredibly well, and we're it's a wonderful relationship. But it did affect that.
Of course. And Delia, in addition to everything else, one of 4 girls, including the older girl, Nora Ephron, who, as Delia points out, ran as fast as she could throughout her life. And the girls had to have the inevitable comparison. And the fact that Nora Ephron died from leukemia adds another dimension to Delia's story. Does she have to have the same outcome? How can she circumvent that? The book is really important read, as well as funny and loving and scary, and about the importance of love and friends and the importance of life. So you did a great job, Delia.
Thank you so much, Joan. It's such a pleasure to talk to you. It's an honor.
You too. Delia Ephron, Left on 10th.
Hello, folks. Larry Kudlow here. Pay attention, because China is leading the largest anti-American alliance since World War II. One that's already dumped U.S. bonds, grabbed 43 million acres of our farmland, and is plotting to dethrone the dollar. That's why IRA and 401k savers are protecting their savings with gold. Please go to freegoldguide.com/Kudlow or just call 800-621-3908 for your free gold guide on how to protect your wealth with gold 100% tax-free.